spoiler zone.
Please don't hurt me. So, it's been a couple weeks since I've made a video, but you know, recently I felt pretty inspired. Due to staying in more, I had the time to binge an amazing show by the name of JoJo. So in an attempt to cope with part 5 being over, part 5 being over. I'm going to go over why part 4 is clearly the best. I thought this would be interesting because from what I've seen, the general fan base doesn't agree with that. Now that might not be the case, but on surface level it seems like I'm the minority here. I feel like most people don't really like part 4, and yet I rank part 3 at the bottom, regardless of all the memes and hype behind it. So let's get a couple things out of the way. This list is based on a single viewing of the animated series. I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch too much. There might be some nuances or setups that I didn't catch the first time of viewing that would bump some things up or put some things down. But what can I say? I'm a young, naive fan that's been overtaken by the charm that JoJo just radiates 24/7. So in an attempt to give you an idea of how I feel, I'm going to go over each and every part in chronological order. And I know what you're thinking. He titles the video, Why Part 4 is the Best JoJo, and spends 4/5 of the video not talking about Part 4. But I figured I'd give you a little mini review of all the parts to help understand my tastes better. Now, obviously I'm going to be covering spoilers, and I'm going to be talking as if you, the viewer, have already seen parts 1 through 5 animated, so don't get mad at me. But now that that's all out of the way, let's start from the beginning. Araki once stated in an interview that the first JoJo was the hardest to make, and I can totally see that. When compared to the other MCs, he's a little flat and he doesn't grow much as a character. Jonathan starts as an absolute beefcake and ends as an absolute beefcake at the bottom of the ocean. The only thing he did outside of his comfort zone is go to a shady alley and somehow charm Speedwagon. He's such a pure-hearted man. This is a trait that none of his other descendants share. One could almost argue that Dio Brando is a better main character than Jonathan. He came from nothing and ended at the top of the world, even after falling for the simplest trick in the book, until also being trapped at the bottom of the ocean. So part 1 takes place in the early to late 1880s in England when a young Dio Brando makes his way to the esteemed Joestar household. Jonathan and Dio Brando fight and develop an unspoken rivalry and absolutely hate each other's guts. And trust me, this show makes you hate his guts. George Joestar has this evil vampire mask hanging on the wall for no reason, and it will transform the wearer into a vampire, as long as it gets activated by spilling blood on it. Dio Brando takes advantage of this mask, granting him immortality, and it's up to JoJo to take him down. Out of all the JoJo parts that are animated, Jonathan's is by far the shortest. While they do pack a lot into part 1, it's gone too soon. After the first 3 episodes, it feels like you've watched an entire series. The main hero is Jonathan Joestar, a sweet-hearted boy that does everything for all the goodness in the world that just so happens to be massively ripped. Look at this man. He was born from wealth and grew up comfortably, aside from being bullied for being rich. His good heart even converted Bruford back to his own personality through their shared chivalry. Throughout his adventures and rivalry with Dio Brando, he meets a lovely young girl, Erina, a street gang boss Speedwagon, and Baron Zappelli. Mr. Zappelli is the man responsible for teaching JoJo Hamon, an energy that is transmitted through the user's blood and strengthened by proper breathing techniques. I'm not sure how Zappelli learns of the mask's whereabouts and that JoJo's connected to it, but boy was it a good thing he did. The task of learning Hamon was pretty quick. A few exercises and a single interaction with the zombie is all it takes for JoJo to pretty much master the power of Hamon. What's cool about Hamon compared to other powers in a different series is that the limits of Hamon can be virtually non-existent. The only limit is the user's mind and creativity in any given situation. For example, during their fight with Tarkus, the crew was going to be defeated without a doubt, until Zappelli and Jonathan created a glider to use as a means of escape to buy them some time. Other than being a badass vampire killing weapon, Hamon can be used for just about anything. It can even extend your youth, although even that has its limits. So upon my first time writing this, I realized that I was going way too into detail. So I'm just gonna summarize everything. See, the combat's pretty simple. You have vampire powers and anti-vampire powers. That's it. Clean and simple. JoJo's a good boy, Speedwagon doesn't do anything, and Zeppeli goes, "Hey baby!" Nothing too complex here. Dio Brando does everything in his power to make JoJo have a bad time, including kissing his girlfriend, killing Danny, killing George, burning the Joestar mansion, and trying to take over the world. Dio is a dick, mostly to the Joestars, and uses charm and charisma to win people over to take his side. The two are polar opposites, so it's no wonder they don't understand each other and get in so many fights. A young boy named Paco gets involved for no reason, and there's also some other warriors of Hamon that do absolutely nothing. Even though they're pretty tough, excluding Dyer, they don't really do much in the grand scheme of things aside from keeping some minions at bay. Dyer is interesting because while he does give Jonathan a hint about Hamon and how to defeat Dio, he kind of isn't the best at utilizing Hamon. Even though he's considered a master, he's a one-trick pony that gets seen through twice. We're lucky Jonathan was there, because if it was solely up to this bunch, the world would be doomed. There's no way they're beating Dio. When they show up, you feel more comfortable, but after second thought, it seems like they're less than qualified for the job. Even Speedwagon made a bigger impact on their victory by heating up Zeppeli's arm when it was frozen. Dio Brando's vampire abilities are super interesting and unique, for the most part. Some of the more obvious vampire traits are immortality, drinking blood, quick regeneration, and being weak to sunlight. However, there are also some unconventional abilities he has. I think the creativity and subverting of expectations is the one thing about this show that keeps me coming back over any other. There are so many ideas thrown at you that do not overstay their welcome, and it's nice to have a high-action, quick-moving series like JoJo. The ability for Dio Brando to freeze people because he removes all the moisture in his body is insane. It's so creative and acts as a counter to Hamon, which is generally passed through direct touch. While this isn't the only way to transmit Hamon, it's the most direct and usually the first thought for an attack. The counters and quick thinking for everybody to get the edge over their opponent is what I love about this series. Once they get some new information about their enemy, they are immediately thinking of ways to get around it. Dio also has the ability to create many weak minions and shoot eye lasers for some reason. It's a good thing Dio made so many minions because one stray boy went through the trouble of rescuing his head and taking him to Jonathan with the intention to steal his body. That's really cool. Although he tries to charm Jonathan, it doesn't work. He resorts to the aforementioned eye lasers and actually manages to deal a pretty lethal hit. But this was all because Jonathan moved to protect Erina. Such a sweet boy. Even though the situation is dire, Jonathan still figures out a way to stop the ship and stop Dio. JoJo tells Erina to flee with the child, and she ends up escaping on the coffin that Dio is in. And Dio and Jonathan are also in, but not really, but they are, because in part 3, they get pulled up in that coffin. Never mind. Jonathan is such a stoic boy that he gave his own life to keep Dio at bay. The ending's pretty simple. Dio confronts JoJo on the ship and says, "I'm back." Jonathan says, "What?" and fucking dies. That's a fine ending. It wraps up everything nicely in its own little bow, while the pacing in the middle felt incredibly slow. It's only for a couple episodes, and it picks up real quick after that. Then again, part 1's only a couple episodes anyways. Overall, it's a fast-paced show with a complete story arc. It ends with the sweet boy Jonathan holding his dear brother Dio's head while he passes, without a single thought of hatred in his mind as the ship goes down. And with that, Jonathan passes with a smile on his face, and his story comes to a conclusion. Woo! We got Joseph, the big boy buying a cola. Oh look, there's Smokey being discriminated against. Pop! Nose full of fists for the cop. Whoop! Bottle cap of Hamon to the finger. And he takes the time to drink the Coke. Your next line is, "I've seen right through you all this time, Joestar." I've seen right through you all this time, Joestar. Hey Susie Q, I'll be back, but make sure you aren't so ugly. Okay. Boom! Crap, I went too hard. Erina's gonna kill me. Best JoJo, hands down. But seriously though, Joseph is the man. He lied to the cops in order to cover for Smokey's butt, despite the fact that they were complete strangers and that he was just pickpocketed. Jonathan's such a goody two-shoes that he would have went after Smokey in an instant and tried to settle it himself. He'd most likely try to avoid violence, but I doubt they would have become friends. Joseph can read the room, unlike his grandfather. The experience of growing up with a more regular childhood and moving to the crooked New York helped Joseph pick up on social cues, something that his grandfather severely lacked. When I finished part 1, it was a really good ending, and despite it being late and me having to get up for work the next day, I decided I was curious to learn about the second JoJo. Boy, was that a mistake. After the first episode, I was officially hooked. The entire day at work, I was just thinking about how the first thing I would do when I got home was watch more. When I was first learning about JoJo and knew that part 3 was so popular, I had it in my head that part 2 was just going to be kinda and Joseph didn't look too interesting, but I was so wrong. I did not know anything about part 2 going in, and I am so glad that I was wrong. The structure of this show is great. No minions or henchmen being sent after the main characters, just pillarmen. They're all strong. The basic plot of part 2 is that Old Man Speedwagon has an extremely wealthy organization now, which becomes an asset that many JoJo's in the future utilize. That's pretty lucky. This organization, for plot reasons, deals with problems that the general public shouldn't know about. One of these being the Pillarmen, and more masks. What's-his-name is scared of his own mortality, so he dons the mask, much like Dio Brando, although he's just a pebble compared to the mountains that are the Pillarmen. So part 2's JoJo is a realist. His subconscious is on another level. He probably can't do basic addition, but his gut knows how to get him out of any situation he's thrown into. Sometimes that means thinking of a quick strategy to counter the enemy. Other times it's running away from a fight he knows he can't win. Joseph's counters are also on an insane level. While the enemies are explaining to JoJo how they're countering him and how they've won, he already has another trick up his sleeve to gain the edge over them. The Tommy gun, the clackers, the oil-infused string, he always comes super prepared just in case. The man used hormone-infused hair to deflect bullets. Who does that? He's quick-witted and can get into people's head. It is such a power move to exert your dominance like that. He subconsciously makes his enemies think that they're inferior. By that point, they've already lost. Their mind thinks it's over and as a result makes it so. Part 2 feels like more of a journey, with some substantial character development. JoJo meets Caesar in Italy, and they quickly become friendly rivals. Caesar teaches Joseph that Hamon can be used in many unconventional ways alongside with other objects with his Hamon bubbles, while Joseph teaches Caesar that there are other ways around a challenge than just using Hamon. It's a good give-and-take relationship. Lisa acts as their master as they go through the proper training regimen. Joseph barely escaped the encounter with the first Pillarmen, and yet these new 3 are on a whole nother level. In fact, Wamu Eshideshi and Kars considered him so weak that they didn't even give him a name. There was a real threat there, and there was a massive chance that they would not make it out of there. That's how you set up danger. The rivalry between Jonathan and Dio was fine, but they were always at about the same level. Here, it wasn't even close. Thankfully, Wamu and Eshideshi are stoic warriors, and saw the potential in Joseph to give them a good fight. A good fight is something that the humans never gave to them, and they were curious. Everybody in part 2 has a unique motive, and I think that's why I like these characters so much. Kars is focused on the jewel, Wamu and Eshideshi are curious about the limits of a human, JoJo wants to get rid of the poison, Caesar wants to get revenge for his father, and Lisa wants to protect the stone. Again in part 2 we have Hamon, but it's turned up to 11. Part 2 gives us an even wider variety of how Hamon can be used and pushes it to the limits. Hamon bubbles that act as an attack and deflect the sun rays? Genius. The Pillarmen have similar abilities to the vampire humans with immortality, super strength, and a weakness to sun. However, their bodies do not hold the same weaknesses as the human counterparts. They can contort their bodies in any way as if their bones were non-existent. They can control elements like wind and fire or produce sharp external blades. The Pillarmen are not something to be messed with. The reason why they're the last of their kind is because they literally killed every other one of them for being too weak. This is a true threat. This conflict is so much better than part 1. Joseph might not be the strongest character in all of anime, but this video isn't comparing JoJo to Goku. Goku can literally reach god levels of power. Sure, Goku can blow the Pillarmen away in an instant, but Joseph knows what you're going to say next. The ending is also unique in the direction that it goes. JoJo doesn't even like the fact that he has to kill the Pillarmen. He feels sympathy for them. While it's true he understands the severity of the situation and that there's nothing he can do, you know he feels bad for the way things had to end up. But some things can't be helped. Some of the fights almost seem like games. And your boy loves a good game. Or tournament arc. Most of the fights were fair and one-on-one. It was cool. Also at the end there were some massive feats of German engineering fighting off the zombie men. Yes, I know I said there weren't any minions or henchmen, but these guys don't even come in direct contact with the main cast. Kars does obtain the power of the jewel and becomes the top of the food chain though. He can even use Hamon without consequence and has no weakness. What do? Nothing. You're screwed. JoJo runs away again, but this time instead of protecting himself, he's protecting the others. Kars is so insanely strong that not even dropping him in lava can stop him because he's using mere air bubbles to cool the lava. Oh. Oh? Anyways, the ending of part 2 is amazing. Cars cuts off JoJo's hand and goes in for the killing blow. However, JoJo's body reacts on its own and uses the power of the jewel to reflect Cars' hormone into the volcano. This causes the rock that they were standing on to shoot up into the sky. They go up, Cars shapeshifts into a set of wings to fly off, and JoJo's severed hand catches him by the neck. It was at this moment that Cars was so preoccupied with that, he didn't even notice the flying debris that he could have easily dodged. And then JoJo predicts his next line. So, hype. Cars then repeats the predicted line, asking if this was all part of his plan. JoJo says, yep. Cars goes, what? And fucking dies. Except not really. Instead, he gets blasted out of the Earth's atmosphere, drifting into space. Since he became the ultimate life form and doesn't need air to survive, he's actually just floating there for all of eternity until he loses all thought. That's terrifying. Of course, the line about it being all part of his plan was a complete lie, but JoJo uses it to get under Cars' skin. Everybody thinks Joseph died along with Cars since the rock he was on crashed from miles into the air, but somehow he comes back during his own funeral with a German-engineered robot hand and a good last Suzy cue. Everyone is happy and the world is finally out of danger. Battle tendency is over, finishing so strong. Not a single time did part 2 feel slow. I wanted to keep watching and never stop. That's why it's ranked so high on my list. Moving on to part 3, there's a new JoJo in town, except he's not in town, he's in jail. Jotaro Kujo is the grandson of Joseph. Unlike Jonathan, however, Joseph is still alive and actually still plays a major role in the story. Joseph's daughter Holly married a Japanese man that we never see and had Jotaro. So it seems like the generations skip every other one from grandfather to grandchild. It's pretty simple, right? Not for long. The reason Jotaro is in jail is because he's a bad person, but also because he's being haunted by a purple ghost man that brings him a radio and beer.
Star Platinum, bring me another beer.
This is a new method of combat introduced in part 3 and becomes a staple from here on out. Now, people fight with eccentric ghosts that will react to the will of its user. So stands can attack people and other stands. However, people cannot attack stands. This creates a unique situation where, given the right circumstances, somebody can be put into a position where they're completely powerless. While some stands are clearly better than others, there's a general power scaling that makes their abilities more evened out. Not referring to pure strength, but stands have different ranges and the intensity of their abilities are usually pretty proportional to that range. The shorter range stands are obviously more direct and in turn more powerful. The user has to put himself closer to the danger, so there's a bit of a risk reward for that. Long range stands, however, take a little bit more effort to do a similar amount of damage. There are also remote stands that do their own thing independent of the user, but because they act on their own, they're usually pretty predictable and they have a trick to them. Once that trick's figured out, they're not much of a threat. Stands from this point on become the central mode of combat for the rest of the series, and much like Hamon, they can be utilized for a lot of different things. There's an endless variety that can be had here, but much like part 1, part 3 doesn't quite hit the mark with how unique they can be used. The idea is still young and it doesn't stretch to its full capabilities until the later parts. Also, there's some rules with stands that I don't really understand, like how normal people can't see them except when they can, or how people can't touch them except when they can, or how Kakyoin uses his stand to possess the body that one time and then never does it again. But there's a lot of that stuff in this series, so it's fine, whatever. Since we're on the topic of things that are kind of iffy on part 3, I'm going to go over my biggest issue. The entire middle third of the show was so tiring to watch. I felt like I was dragging my boots through mud. The encounters were one 2-episode fight after another 2-episode fight. None of them felt all that unique. Most of these fights could have fit in one episode and they all felt very much the same. Henchman comes out, they beat him. Henchman comes out, they beat him. It really isn't until the second wave of henchmen when they reach Egypt that they become a little bit more interesting. Speaking of henchmen, why does Dio have to be so charismatic? None of these people have their own interests. It's all for Dio. I'm fighting you because Dio said to. So obviously these guys can't be reasoned with and they actually lose their lives. They all die. That's actually kind of one positive I have for this, is that normally in other shows the main character is too sweethearted to actually kill their enemy, but in part 3 they're like, fuck it, whatever. See ya. But seriously, these guys are too far gone that they will not stop for any reason. It's either your life or theirs. They force themselves into that situation and have to live with the consequences. Jotaro might seem cold-hearted on the outside, but that's just because he has trouble expressing his true feelings on the inside. So let's talk about the characters. I like Jotaro. He's dependable and smart-witted. This might have something to do with all the fights he gotten into and his angsty teen behaviors, but he's no stranger to dealing with people. My man Joseph is back. and while he doesn't shine as bright as he did in part 2, he still has his moments. The side characters are okay, they definitely took some time to grow on me. Kakyoin and Polnareff less so, but after Avdol's... How can you hate these guys? They grew to care so much about each other. They have each other's backs as well, both through their mutual trust and in their stand abilities. Each of their stands are unique. Jotaro is so insanely OP with his power and precision. The fact that he starts out so powerful is both hype and leaves him with little room to grow. I think that's another issue I have with these characters, is that they don't go through much change throughout their journey, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. Magician's Red is neat, but I feel like he's not utilized that much, especially in the later episodes. The other stands are okay too, and everybody has a chance or two to shine. Joseph's stand, however, is pretty unique. Because of the way Hermit Purple is, it's not really utilized in combat all that much. Joseph usually takes a backseat in that department most of the time. However, I think his stand is perfect for who he is. The fact that it can be used like a rope reflects his tricky nature, utilizing objects to his advantage. And not only that, but it is a great conductor of Hamon. Last but certainly not least, his Spirit Photo ability taps into his natural intuition and ability to protect what's going to happen next. The man predicts people's lines before they can even say it. He gets a chance to use that trick in part 3 one time, and ooh, it gave me butterflies. My man still got it! Not to mention his general knowledge of the world and other practical applications makes him necessary to the team. There is one character that goes through a massive change, however, and that's Iggy. Iggy is a dog that gets dragged out to the desert against his will and likes eating coffee-flavored gum. I don't think I could even come up with a more random food for a character to like, let alone a dog. He seriously just wants to get out of there and live a comfortable life. He kind of does his own thing the whole time, even finding Dio's hideout before everybody else. And he's a dog. Until his battle with Pet Shop, getting out of there was the only thing he wanted to do. This is one of my favorite parts of Stardust Crusaders because you finally get an insight into Iggy's thought, and you get to see his entire character arc unfold. Against his better judgment, he saves that kid and makes himself a target. He narrowly escapes alive and comes back to the gang with the look of somebody who means business. And he means business. Iggy changes and goes, fuck it, I hate these guys too. Maybe these guys aren't so bad. They're fighting not just for themselves, but the rest of the world. Iggy takes the initiative. Everybody was terrified going through that mansion in Cairo. But Iggy easily sniffs out the guy that changed the look of everything, brings out the fool, and instantly takes him out. And everybody's like, damn. And that's why Iggy's the true protagonist of part 3. All jokes aside though, I do think he goes through the best character arc, and that he's also pretty unlucky to be a dog in JoJo. This is going on for a while, so I'm just going to quickly wrap up some other things that I like. The Oingo Boingo brothers are awesome. Love that. There's a much needed break in the formula. It was cool that Whole Horse came back. The gambling and video game brothers were a welcome diversion as well. It played on their skills other than just fighting and created some more tension. Vanilla Ice will go down in history as the henchman that posed the biggest threat. Especially with Jotaro absent, there was real tension there, especially after Avdol lost his life so quickly. Again, the 2-episode fight format got tiring so quickly. We didn't need 2 episodes of a baby or Joseph and Avdol getting it on. Star Platinum is OP, so whenever Jotaro was present, there really wasn't much tension. Monkey stand user. And also for no reason, Dio gets really ugly after obtaining Joestar blood, which he already had in him. Speaking of the ending's pretty good. Dio's ability is impossible to compete with. He makes one crucial mistake though, and that's saying that Star Platinum is similar to the world. Dio plays around with Jotaro a lot, and then Jotaro starts being able to react slightly during the time pauses. I don't know if Dio thinks that was through some kind of speed or sheer will or something, but I'm not sure how he didn't see the reason why he lost coming up. During the fight, they both push their limits. Dio's time stop gets longer and longer, and Jotaro goes as far to stop his own heart in order to trick Dio. There's a lot of high energy action during this fight, and boy is it hype. There was a meme video of this fight actually, which I'm kind of embarrassed to admit is the reason why I came back to watching it. I originally started watching the show with somebody, but I came in a couple episodes after it started during the time where it was a really big drag in part 1, and I regret it. Back to the fight with Dio, it had a similar fault with other multi-episode fights where it just goes on for far, far too long. Finally, Jotaro gets the upper hand by revealing how similar their stands in fact are. After the Road Roller smash, Dio says that nothing can stop him now. Jotaro says, Star Platinum, the world. Dio goes, what? And fucking dies. Joseph comes back and the sun gets rid of Dio's entire body once and for all. A good conclusion to the story, it ties up every loose end, but it doesn't end there. Part 5. So you might be wondering why I'm skipping over part 4, and that's because effective persuasion usually starts or ends with the strongest point, and part 4 is going to bring it all together. Parts 4 and 5 bring back the energy from part 2, and they are so good. I flip-flopped between where part 2 and 5 should go on my list, but honestly they're both bangers and amazing in their own way. Part 5 starts in Naples, Italy with the young son of Dio. Yes, that Dio. But instead of JoJo, he's JoJo. The part for Koichi to find him and watch him doesn't last too long, and that's really the only connection part 5 has with the parts before it. For some reason, Koichi looks like this. I mean, but his eyes, and what happened to his little nose? Oh no. Anyways, he finds Giorno and says, I don't think he's a bad guy, and then that plot gets thrown away, which is totally fine. Giorno has his own goals, and it's completely independent from everything else going on anyways. That JoJo charm doesn't leave this one either, but on top of that, he gains the Dio charm, making Giorno unknowingly the most charismatic JoJo. Even though he doesn't use it on purpose, people are just drawn to him and trust him. Another unique thing about Part 5 is that the main cast are part of what is considered the bad guys. Giorno joins a gang. Not only that, but it's the gang responsible for everything he hates and wants to fix in this town, so he joins it with the aim of destroying it from the inside. What a great premise. He hates that drugs are being sold to kids, joins the gang selling it, gets close to the boss, kills him. Bada bing, bada boom. Stands are back, but now they're a little bit more complicated, and it puts our heroes in different situations that they have to figure their way out of, rather than just going, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, and then proceeding to beat the shit out of them. Now, this still happens, but in a more complicated way. Also, the reintroduction of the Muda was really cool. Everything about the fights are hype. It doesn't matter who you are, whenever that 7-page Muda plays, everyone in the room just drops dead. Speaking of which...
And now, a dramatic recreation of the 7-page Muda.
By me.
A piece of shit like you?
And that music though! Sound design in part 5 blows it out of the water. Dun, dun, dun 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 dun. That hits so hard. On an early episode of the Trash Taste podcast, Gaunt says, I love JoJo's sound design so much. It's one of those shows where if you hear a sound, you know the exact stand, and sometimes it's the exact episode and the exact fight. Connor also said on the topic that there's so many sounds you can say are iconic. Like when you hear that gunshot for the punch, you know it's a JoJo punch. Also, that torture dance was so weird and artistic out of nowhere, and I love it. This series just oozes creativity. The cast is great. A bunch of troublemakers with good hearts. They were all wronged by the world, and the gracious Bucciarati gave them a second chance. After the boss chops off Trish's hand, both Giorno and Bucciarati say, fuck it, let's kill the boss. And everybody says, sure. Except Fugo, because for some reason he isn't suicidal. Despite having one of the most dangerous stands, he chooses life. Can't blame him. Unlike in part 3, parts 4 and 5 don't have a slow moment whatsoever. This part does, however, kind of fall back into the category of a bunch of underlings are sent after the main cast and they defeat them for the boss's sake. What part 5 does do differently though is introduce a second entity that both wants the main cast and the boss dead. It doesn't quite feel like that though, since up until the very end that group only attacked Giorno and the gang anyways. But that makes sense because they were trying to get to Trish in order to get closer to the boss anyways. So it adds a little bit of a power triangle, but not really. Abakio's death was sad. Very, very sad. Out of nowhere it was taken, and that scene with him as the police officer, oh, I can't. You feel for this group of troublemakers because they're all unique and the world just won't let them catch a break. I feel for them more in part 3 because they seem more human. I don't know how Giorno is 15 and looks like this, but comparing Narancia at 17 and Jotaro at 17, it looks a little bit more rooted in reality. The main cast of part 5 not only goes through moral changes, but they try to better themselves in practical ways too. Narancia is learning basic math even though he's terrible at it, and Fugo is working on his temper. they're getting there. The introduction of the boss's daughter Trish adds to the tension as well. Not only is the boss their main goal, but they also have a side mission to protect Trish from anybody that wants to use her in their own quest for the boss. This added tension changes up their goal from just going up and killing the main bad guy to having a little side mission. They have to work around Trish's lack of powers at first, and it creates more interesting situations. Although that doesn't really happen too much because she's in the turtle a lot of the time. Her encounter with Notorious B.I.G. was pretty cool though. Another previous cast member makes an appearance towards the end, but gets kind of shafted and forever turns into a turtle. I'm also not sure why Bucciarati was dead, but also not dead for half the show, but it was great either way. Speaking of things I don't get, how did they know that Notorious B.I.G. had a stand and it would do that after he died? Although there is a lot in this show that I don't really understand and we just kind of accept it, like the Luck Pluck sword in part 1. I don't know, whatever. The last character I want to focus on is the boss. The split personalities thing is really cool. It adds to the mystery and it also adds a little bit more tension on the villain side whenever Doppio's out. Not to mention 2 stand abilities. I kind of feel bad for Doppio. Obviously, what he's doing isn't the best, but it's because of his other personality that he turned out that way. His design is super nice and kind, which starkly contrasts to Diavolo, and it adds for a more whole character that way. It's kind of interesting though, because despite that contradicting fact, his 2 sides don't contrast each other, they actually are coming together as one. People often say that they don't understand how King Crimson's ability works, and like, I totally understand, but I think I've come up with an analogy that can kind of help explain it. Now, he states that he erases time, but that's not really what happens. Think of life like a YouTube video. It has a start and an end, and everything is predetermined. King Crimson is like whenever you press that little plus 15 seconds button, and you see what instantly skips ahead. All the things in the video have still happened, but you as the viewer didn't get that information. King Crimson, however, is the master of that time and somehow gains slight premonition. Maybe that's from Doppio's side. There's some specifics that I'm still trying to work out, but I still think that this analogy is pretty close. The villain in this part is built up so much, but in the end I feel like his threat doesn't really last long. He's a huge threat, don't get me wrong, but even after the fight with Bucciarati when they first meet, he's unseen until the end. And even then, he's Doppio most of the time, just kind of hanging out doing his own thing. I like that, don't get me wrong. But in hindsight, it kind of takes away from the threat. The fact that he could change at any time was scary, and what he does is scary, but I feel like his presence just wasn't there a lot of the time and the gang got a little too comfortable up until the Coliseum. One thing I like about this main cast is that you can tell just how much they care for each other. In part 3 there were some bonds, but the characters didn't really show it much on the outside. Aside from whenever a character died, they seemed pretty nonchalant about each other. In part 5, these guys seem like the best of friends and they are not afraid to show it. They pick on each other, feel comfortable enough to lash out on each other, and express themselves fully around each other. Not only is there that level of trust, but there's personality in their interactions. Whoa, 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 hey. Their tears for each other aren't repressed. When they cry, they cry. All they have are each other, and when that's taken away, it's devastating. Giorno even cries for the first time of his life over a death. It's so sad to see these guys go. Now the ending went a little bit crazy, but it makes sense, I guess. Kinda. Explaining why the arrow gives a person a stand is great. Finally, the mystery is solved. The idea of using the arrow that gives a person the powers of a stand on a stand in order to give it powers even farther beyond that, now that's just crazy. But this man is genius. Araki comes up with so many different ideas, I can't even begin to imagine where they all come from. Switching bodies was cool, the tension with the arrow was cool, Golden Wind Requiem destroyed my brain. Like seriously though, King Crimson uses his ability like usual, and he should easily be able to take care of Giorno, but like, he doesn't? Instead, Golden Wind Requiem sends him on an acid trip that ends up reversing his time skip and changing the way he views reality. Oh. Diavolo gets told that his reality will never come true, which sends him into a panic where the only thing he can do is try to figure out a way out of this. Golden Wind Requiem says, "Not even my stand user understands what's going on, so I'm not even going to explain it to you." Diavolo goes, "What?" and gets trapped in an infinite death loop. Then Giorno becomes the new gang leader, I'm assuming, with his right-hand man Mista. Now this is a place in society befitting of a descendant of Dio. What he does with his power remains to be seen, and I really hope this gets referred back to in later parts. I can see a lot of cool ways of how to integrate Passion into the story and how characters would interact with each other. Okay, it's time. the moment we've all been waiting for, Part 4. Part 4 is such a feel-good section of JoJo. All of the openings vibe so hard. Morio is such a great setting, and the villain tackles a topic related to real-life fears. Now, it may not be as grandiose as some of the others, the entire world isn't gonna end, but it's the story of an entire town coming together and taking care of their own problem. Now, there's so much I want to talk about with Part 4 that I probably won't be able to get to, so I'm gonna start with the town of Morio. Part 4 focuses on world building and fleshing out the setting as much as possible. It starts right off the bat with a delightful radio jingle of the town, then immediately revealing that there's a terrible horror that plagues it. The subtle but not so subtle aversion of expectations sets the scene immediately. Part 4 just constantly oozes charm. They're just kids doing kid things. The Morio landmarks are like little pieces of history and folklore that our heroes either create or experience throughout the duration of the show. The alleyway that you're not supposed to turn around in is an established folk story that is addressed multiple times throughout, and it just makes the setting that much more believable. The Angelo rock is a great example of something that our heroes started because the rock looks like it has a face. I mean, it does have a face. So the tradition of saying, "Yo, Angelo," as you walk by becomes another bizarre habit that the town adopts. What's even better is that no one except Jotaro and Josuke know the true origin of the rock. Another point that I wanted to make about both the world building and why I like Part 4 so much is that a lot of the side characters are kind of just regular people doing their own thing. The Arrow is owned by a few people that just pick randoms all willy-nilly creating stand users. There's no one big bad guy with countless minions. Kira is the main bad guy, but he's just a simple man who wants a simple life. A lot of the antagonists don't really have motives that truly harm anybody. Tonio just runs an amazing restaurant and Rohan's just a manga artist. While I don't think everyone's actions were good, everybody's just trying to make a name for themselves. I touched on this a little bit in Part 5, but here, I think they blew it out of the water. Some people changed sides, some people came to understand themselves and their powers better, and some made new friends and formed bonds that'll never go away. This town is lively and full of people with their own hopes and dreams. The characters actually do things other than fight, and it's so wholesome. The idea that stand users are somehow attracted to each other and are destined to come into contact is really cool. That fact alone leads to so many coincidences that without it, there'd be no show. I loved when Shigashi died. The whole town of stand users came together and decided that they had to take care of this problem themselves. No one was gonna save them. The entire town is working together toward a singular goal. Whenever Josuke goes to Fungami at first in order to help him, he's like, dude, no way. But because Josuke's mother is involved and you can tell he's in a panic, Fungami goes, why not? The main cast gained so many resources around the town, it even gets to the point where Hayato, who doesn't even have a stand or a complete understanding of what's going on, makes an effort to go against the dangerous Kira and trust random people like Josuke to get rid of him. I've been trapped in here for so goddamn long. Well, I can help you out. Awesome. Hey, that old man is trying to kill us and all our loved ones. Whoa, not awesome. He went that way. Part 4 deals with an entire history that is completely self-contained in that town. It's got ghosts, it's got variety, it's got the best Italian restaurant in the industry. So also stand abilities become a lot more complex coming after Part 3, and neither Part 4 nor 5 do it better than the other. The only reason I'd give Part 4 the slight edge is because their stands more often than not are used for more things other than fighting. This creates an insane amount of variety and tools at their disposal. A scene early on that immediately got me hooked was how Josuke casually punched a hole into his mom's stomach and repaired it like it's nothing. Now, he did this to get the enemy stand out of her, but he played it so well. Heaven's Door can be used for an infinite amount of things. Echo has 3 forms, each with their own meaning toward why they exist. Whether it be the invisible bombs or the fact that Bites the Dust makes it virtually impossible for Hayato to even help, this villain constantly has the edge over everybody behind the scenes. The biggest weakness about Bites the Dust though is that even Kira doesn't remember what happens, even though he can kinda catch on when it's working. That being said, Hayato does remember everything, which gives him a chance to keep replaying and figure out the best way to beat him with everybody surviving. Speaking of Yoshikage Kira, I think it's time to focus on the villain. He's great. There's an immediate setup with him at the beginning showing one of his girlfriends. His theme contrasts the happy tone of Morio, and it makes everything much more unsettling when you know there's a murderer running around, while the rest of the cast are doing things like defeating bad guys, or collecting thrown out lottery tickets for some quick cash. What's interesting is that during the time of writing this, Japan was actually faced with a hidden murderer just like that, hammering in even harder that this could be a real threat that real people face, leading to the believability of Mordio even more. The fact that Kira is hidden in plain sight makes him that much more terrifying. Not only is he hidden, but he actually gets found and disappears again. Using Aya's stand and casting her aside, he took on a new identity and lived out as a co-worker, integrating himself into a family. The amount of tension felt on both sides is staggering. When the boys were eating lunch, I was actually rooting for the villain to get out without being caught. The fight with Jotaro, where they're straight up two adults who both know one of them won't make it, the scene with Hayato in the bath, everybody being afraid to touch anything, and when Josuke is trying to heal Okuyasu are all insanely tense moments that even thinking about it now makes my stomach tight. We can't forget about that theme either. It perfectly captures the malice and creepy nature of his personality, the hostility he has for his victims, and the elegance he radiates as he uses their limbs for personal pleasure. It's elegant, but daunting. I do like Kira's first design more, but what better way to make him harder to find than to make him look more normal? The last fight was good. It didn't really make any sense why it was Josuke the whole time. Jotaro's The World came in handy at the end when Kira had the hostage, and he does, in fact, beat the ever-living shit out of him. Sucks that they couldn't just kill him, but you know, justice system. Whoops, the ambulance ran him over. Alright, I'm glad he dies though, because then we get that interaction scene with him and Remy, his first victim. She lets him know who she is. He reverts to his original look, realizing that he did in fact die and was a ghost. He was kind of pumped about not crossing over yet though, until Remy says, "Hey Kira, look behind you." Yoshikage says, "What?" and fucking dies. Some other things I like include Josuke's theme. The battle themes are always amazing, especially Giorno and Josuke. I said this before, but I love how the whole town comes together to get rid of the threat. Even though Josuke and Rohan don't get along, they still put their trust in each other. Also, Rohan is kind of a terrible person. He literally killed that one guy and left his shriveled up body laying there. Although watching him grow as a person to the point where he cries about not being able to see his deceased friend anymore gets to you. Oh man. Also, fuck these girls. So what do you guys think? I feel like I've justified my opinion enough for you to kind of see where I'm coming from. This is by no means a definitive list of what I think every JoJo fan should think. It's just kind of what tickles my personal fancies. Of course, comment down below and let me know what you think about the first 5 parts, which ones you like better, what parts you like, if there's anything I missed. Maybe I'll make another video reading some of your comments and having little discussions about them. There's a lot I've missed, and I could definitely go more in depth with some things. And trust me, I know that there's a lot that I missed. JoJo's such a huge series that it's impossible to cover in one video. Please try to keep later parts out of the comments for my sake. I haven't had a chance to read any of it yet, although I plan on doing it very soon. I just have to find the best way to do it. I don't think there's any physical manga that are translated in English yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I've fallen in love with this series, and I can't wait to get more of it. Nothing feels better than finishing a part and going on to the next one, not knowing what you're gonna get. Everything is amazingly artistic, and Araki somehow manages to keep everything fresh. The changing color schemes every 5 minutes is just so nice to look at. I've also heard some last names in part 7 that are getting me excited, so I need to get on that. Well, thank you guys so much for watching me ramble and gush over JoJo. It really means a lot. This show means a lot to me. I've loved it. I love it. I'm getting severe brain rot from it. So like, subscribe, all that junk, and I'll see you later.